She made a name for herself as a media executive and creative storyteller, but a crushing loss changed the course of her life after the murder of her beloved 7-year-old daughter, Gabrielle, at the hands of her ex-husband just hours after finalizing their divorce. Former ABC News producer Michelle Hord is here to discuss her new book, The Other Side of Yet, Finding Light in the Midst of Darkness, a memoir about unimaginable grief, faith, and astounding resilience. Welcome. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I feel like, full disclosure, your friend.
Yes.
Not just a former colleague. And I just, you know, when I first got the book, I was so curious, before I even opened it, just being a curious person, the other side of yet. People are going to wonder about that. I know that you're a woman of faith and religion, and so this is scripturally based, but give us a sense of the other side of yet.
Absolutely. So it began with the verse in Job that's very well known, though he slay me, yet do I trust him. And as I was literally leaving the crime scene where I lost my daughter so horrifically, I kept hearing this verse in my head. And I felt like whatever evil had caused this to happen was supposed to take me out, and I wasn't going to let it happen. So it was a bit of a defiant, okay, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I can't imagine why this would happen, yet I'm going to continue to trust. And then over time, I realized that it had broader application. And so whether it's COVID, whether it's a divorce, we all have these losses where things just look dramatically different. And there's the definitive before in your life. And there's this opportunity to pivot and say, yes, this is true, yet I can have more, I can have a different life, I can create new opportunities for myself. And so that's where the title came from.
And you talk about the idea that your therapist said, borrow my confidence.
Yes.
Explain that.
You know, so many times, especially early on with trauma therapy, there were days where it felt like, I don't know how I'm going to get out of bed. I don't know how I'm going to keep going. And she was always so reassuring. I started writing right away because I've always written, and it felt like my way out. I had no idea I was writing a book. I was just journaling. But as I would read some of them to my therapist, she would say, you know, you have so much hope. You have so much faith. And it felt like, no, that's it. I'm barely keeping it together. And so the borrow my confidence was often about her being able to see the light where I was still kind of stumbling in the dark. And so I held on to that throughout.
And this book is obviously meant to help people cope with just supreme loss. At what point in your process did you think, you know, I'm going to write a book to help others through this?
I received so many. I would share some of the poetry and journal entries with dear friends at the suggestion of my therapist. And I had so many people say to me, I shared this with my aunt who just lost her husband. I shared this with someone else. This was so helpful. After my daughter's funeral, where I gave the eulogy, I had people say, I've never heard anything like that before. And so over time, it really became clear that God was somehow using these holes in my heart to shine light for other people. And so it's not about me. You know, my goal from day one has been making sure that Gabrielle's legacy was far outweighing and much stronger than what happened to her.
The idea of letting go of the expectation of explanation. That's something that you talk about in the book. Explain what that is.
There is nothing that will ever make this make sense. And, you know, I went through all of the horror. You could imagine the nightmares as a mother of what if and what did I miss. But part of the borrow my confidence from my therapist was there was nothing to miss. That this was just a horrific situation that could not have been predicted. There were not signs. And so how do you reconcile with something like this happening the way it happened, and for the perpetrator to be who the perpetrator was? And so I had to separate in my head that the person that I knew before did exist, that what I knew as my life before did exist, and somehow that didn't exist anymore, and that everything had changed.
All of this for you has been so extremely personal. I think that a number of us can relate in the sense of the pandemic and is COVID coming, is it going, or the unrest and the tumult that's happening in Ukraine and gas prices and inflation. How do we challenge ourselves to get to the other side of yet?
I think what's most important is it's not linear. You know, I don't believe in linear stages of grief. I believe that you're riding the waves probably for the rest of your life, and you learn how to deal with whatever you had to leave behind and somehow still remain buoyed and remain on top of the water. We all wanted to believe we knew exactly what we were doing before COVID hit, and that we knew what work looked like, we knew what our lives looked like. We don't. And so something like what happened to me, and literally what's happened to the world, teaches us we don't have that control. And so the best thing we can do is control what we can and to hold on to that hope that there is always a new horizon.
I have a question for you, Michelle, that I don't really know that there's an answer per se, but in the very beginning of your book, you talk about the idea of being on the beach and your daughter's footprints on the sand.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just so curious how you got through that.
It's not me. There is nothing I wanted more than to have that little girl. You knew me before I had her. You know, she was the center of my universe. There is nothing that could have happened that would have been worse. I'm a TV producer. I, quadruple baby-proofed everything. There was nothing I didn't get, except for that there was a black hole I was about to fall into. And if it was not for my faith, that allows me to walk off a cliff and believe somehow there's going to be something to catch me, I don't know what I don't know what would have happened. You know, I've joked and said the book could have been, it's God, the end. Like, really, for me. And, listen, people have different faiths, different backgrounds. My faith has tethered me. I think believing in something bigger than you, if that's the universe, if that's Mother Nature, if that's God, whatever that is, knowing that you're tethered to something bigger and that there can be more than whatever you see right now is what has kept me walking every day.
What do you want people to know and remember about Gabrielle and now your foundation, Gabrielle's Wings?
What's most important to me is she was an incredibly kind little girl. She had a great sense of humor. I think she was gorgeous. She had this bubbly, effervescent personality, but she was very kind to other children. And I heard so much of that from parents and kids after I lost her, that she was my first friend. She stopped someone from bullying me. So Gabrielle's Wings for me, which is the nonprofit in her memory, is all about doing things for other children that I'd wanted to do for my daughter, focusing on elementary school kids and underserved communities and looking for those gaps. If that's the gap of not knowing how to swim, if that's the gap of not having an accessible playground, if that's a gap of figuring out in the COVID area how to increase Wi-Fi bandwidth in an area where there isn't great Wi-Fi. We're looking for those opportunities that could really be game changers for children.
Michelle Hord, it is just a pleasure. I thank you so much for talking with us today. And her book, The Other Side of Yet, is now available wherever books are sold.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.